Chryso friends, welcome back to Opus Elenae, where we get in over our heads. I have always loved embroidery, obviously. So when I came across a new to me embroidery technique, I knew I had to try it. Kat Makes on Instagram, link in the description, made the most amazing Art Deco beaded tank top last year, and I fell intensely in love, and I needed something just like it, but completely different for myself. Well, what I really wanted was a 1920s evening dress, but it seemed unwise to jump into a project that big with no real experience yet. Tambour embroidery originated in 18th century France, influenced by much earlier techniques from China and especially the aari embroidery from India. It's worked on taut fabric, usually stretched on a frame. The stitch is formed by using a teeny tiny hook to make a very small chain stitch. Beads and other decorative elements like sequins can be strung on the thread and added from the bottom side of the fabric, or loaded onto the needle and added to the loop of the chain stitch from above. Tambour, also called luneville embroidery after the French town that popularized it in Europe, is traditionally worked from below with the wrong side of the fabric facing up. Indian aari embroidery is worked from above with a longer, thinner hook. Everyone, go grab your cuppa. Thank you all for your suggestions last video. I feel much more inspired and less restless. On the advice of one of my croissants, I picked up some Harney & Sons Paris because I needed another excuse to order from Harney & Sons. It's a slightly fruity black tea that tastes like vanilla and caramel with just a hint of bergamot. And I finally have a discount code to offer you. If you use the affiliate code in the description, you can get $10 off a $30 purchase. Full disclosure, I do also get some store credit, which will make it easier for me to obtain more teas to review for you all. Let's get into it. I wanted to make a sleeveless top with minimal shaping, partially because I didn't want to have to figure out how to bead around darts, but mostly to mimic the long, straight lines of the 1920s. I settled on the sorbetto tank top from Colette, which is a free pattern, and you can find the link in the description. You might remember this pattern as the jumping off point I used for my Edwardian corset cover, if you've been around that long. Once I had that done, I spent a while looking at beading patterns from the 20s, which I collated into an inspiration board. After hours of looking, I decided to just basically dupe this discontinued tank from Anthropology in my preferred color palette. Then I played around in Procreate trying to find different beading designs for the little teardrop bits before settling on this combination of seed beads, bugle beads, and sequins. Next, I printed out and taped the shirt pattern and drew out the beading design onto the paper pattern before tracing it onto the silk organza I bought ages ago with a project like this in mind. I did lightly starch the fabric before this step, but it was still a bit squiggly. Nowhere near as bad as chiffon though. Most of the embroidery projects I do are fairly small, or they're not the kind that need to be embroidered under tension. Tambour embroidery, though, which takes its name from the French word for drum, definitely needs to be stretched while working. In order to use my largest slate frame, I was going to need something to hold it. In past projects, I've used legs that attach directly to the frames, but I don't have a convenient table big enough to hold this project. Instead, I am using this as an excuse to invest in a set of trestles from TF Woodcraft, the same company that makes all my slate frames. Their work is so beautiful and the quality is amazing. I like that these are fully height and angle adjustable so I can customize it for any chair I want to use. I try to pick a new hardwood for each piece I get from them, so these trestles are wenge and the frame that I'll be using is sapele. And of course, shameless plug for the small business, the link is in the description. To dress the frame, I'll first attach wide twill tape to the roller bars, like I've done with other projects such as my goldwork bag and embroidered shields. Because I'll be embroidering the tank top in several parts, this way I can pin the organza to the tape away from the edge of the fabric. I'll pin the first section to the roller bars, making sure the initial tension is even and the grain is straight. Next, I'll use twill tape wrapped around the stretcher bars to increase lateral tension. I'm not pulling on this first side at all, only pinning it in place with even tension along the tape. The second side is where I'll stretch the organza tight while pinning into place. This prevents warping along the grain. And lastly, I'll pull the roller bars a bit further apart and reposition the pins holding them, and then pin the excess fabric up and out of the way. Beads come packaged in one of two ways, loose and strung. In order to use the loose beads, I'm going to use this spinner tool and a hooked wire to string them up. It's kind of a neat process, but it takes forever. Time to gather my tools: beads, glover's thread, a spool holder, tambour needle, and scissors. Because the beading is worked in one continuous chain stitch, I'll need to transfer my beads from the storage string to the spool of thread I'll be using. Why didn't I string the beads on there in the first place? Because I'll need the thread clear for some other beading techniques throughout the project. After securing the thread at the beginning, I can start the actual beading. The stitch is pretty simple. Using the hooked needle, I'll form a series of chain stitches, catching the thread from below and pulling it through the loop formed from the previous stitch. Just like crochet, but with fabric in the way. The beads are secured from below when the thread and bead is wrapped around the needle to pull the loop up through the fabric. It's a deceptively simple process that takes so much practice to get right. You can see that I'm twisting the needle back and forth in order to adjust which direction the hook is facing. When the needle is on the top side of the fabric, the hook needs to be facing away from the line of stitches so the loop doesn't slip off. And when it's on the bottom of the fabric, it needs to face toward the line of stitching so that the wrapped thread can be pulled to the top side without catching the previous loop. The direction the thread is wrapped affects which way the needle should turn. The wrong direction will add an extra twist that makes it more difficult to manipulate the thread, while the right direction makes a clear loop. It sounds so much more complicated when I have to say it out loud. With some practice, it becomes really intuitive and there's a kind of flow to it. The hardest part is to maintain a consistent tension and not pull the thread too tight, which I admit I was not the best at. Stretching during a session is super important. I try to set a timer to stretch and move about every 20 minutes or so. After the outlines of the scales are all beaded, I'm going to turn the frame over and work the teardrop part from the top of the fabric in the aari style, since I'll be switching between different types of beads. I'll need a mini paint palette, sequins, bugle beads, seed beads and thread, and scissors. Each bead type will get its own well in the palette, which is plastic and light enough to sit on top of the fabric without warping everything. The beads will be loaded onto the needle before stitching and dropped onto the loop every stitch, securing them from the top instead of underneath. It's easier to see what I'm doing with this technique and allows for greater precision, and since I'm alternating between a row of seed beads, a row of sequins, then seed beads, then bugle beads, and then filling in the rest of the drop with seed beads, it makes switching back and forth a lot easier. I'll make sure to take a few chain stitches at the beginning and the end to secure the thread. Once I finished all the teardrops, I'll make sure the threads are pulled to the back side of the fabric before flipping the work over and using the tambour needle to knot and weave in the ends. This project will be worked in 3 sections, so once I've done all I can on one section, I'll unpin the fabric, move to the next unworked section, and repin it to the frame. Yes, there will be lines of pinholes running through the shirt, but it's fairly easy to massage the threads back into place at the very end. Once the fabric is secured, it's time to do it all over again. I don't usually keep track of how long I work on a project unless it's a commission. It takes as long as it takes. But since this was a new art to me, I decided to keep time logs for myself just to see. From the beginning of the design process to the end of hand finishing, this project took me 146.25 hours. That's more than 3 40-hour work weeks. Now, is that number exceptionally high because this is all really new to me? Yes, of course. But I think it's important to understand exactly what goes into a project like this, even if only not to underestimate my labor to myself. And the third and final section, I'm sure you all get the drift by now. I did run out of seed beads and had to order more, so while I'm waiting for those to arrive, I'm adding the sequins and bugle beads, leaving space in between for the line of seed beads that separates them. Thank you to all of my current and continuing Ko-fi members, especially my newest member, Willow. Welcome to the basket. Your support and the support of all of my members and croissants makes it easier to do what I do and provide quality content for everyone. Thank you all so much. Stick around after this brief commercial break to see me construct the actual tank top. When I transferred the pattern onto the fabric, I traced the shirt at the cutting line and marked out seam allowances on the design so I didn't accidentally bead into them. I used a 5/8 inch seam allowance instead of my usual 1/2 inch because I'm going to be finishing the raw edges a bit differently than I usually do. Instead of serging or hand finishing, I'm going to be using French seams. I'll sew the pieces of the tank top together with the right sides facing out. The stitching line should be about halfway into the seam allowance. Stick with me here. Next, I will trim down those seam allowances to about 1/8 of an inch beyond that initial stitching line. Then I'll flip the shirt inside out and pin the seams back the other way and stitch along the final seam allowance line. This encases the raw edge between those two lines of stitching. It's a bit fiddly and takes twice as long at the machine, but it is the cleanest way to finish sheer fabrics like organza or the chiffon I used when I made the shirt for my Tudor Witch project. The last thing to do is to finish the arm size and neckline with the tiniest rolled hem that will be hidden by the lines of beading that run along these openings, and to hem the shirt with a simple double fold. I'll do both of these steps by hand to be as precise as possible. Thanks for coming along with me today. This project has been a lot of fun, despite being completely down to the wire there at the end. I think it's been a successful proof of concept for a beaded garment, although I am going to have to revise my estimate of the time it'll take to make an entire flapper dress upwards by at least an order of magnitude. That's a problem for future Courtney though. If you enjoy this channel and want to support it, you can do that monetarily on my Ko-fi or for free by sharing this or any of my videos with friends and social media. If you're interested in finding a supportive community interested in history and crafting, come join us on the Discord at the link in the description box. Until next time, be kind, do the work, continue supporting marginalized people, and keep creating. Well.